Is that a what?
A banquette you're sitting at, or is that your cat?
It's just a sofa.
Mhm.
It kind of looks like a banquet, I know.
No, I can only see a little bit of it.
We're live streaming now, just FYI. We'll record in a minute.
I've been on call since 6:45 this morning, playing with different green screens. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I look like my. But this should be an easy one, DNS.
What could be controversial about the budget, right?
Oh God, it looks so lovely where you are, Christian.
I wish I was there too.
The three hurricanes and storms behind right down there, though, so probably better you're here.
Well, school starts tomorrow.
Yeah, wow, right?
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna start letting attendees in, although I didn't see that many signed up, so I don't know how many there'll be.
Where are the participants?
Correct.
Really, what I need is a booster seat.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Doug.
Hey there.
Hey, Doug.
Hi, everybody.
Hey there.
Julian and Sarah, can you fight among yourselves to figure out who does the minutes? I suggest rock, paper, scissors, but whatever works for you is fine.
Hi.
Sarah, would you mind taking minutes? I'm actually trying to juggle 2 calls right now.
Sure, I can take the minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're very close to a quorum. I'm just going to give it 1 or 2 more minutes so as to reward those who come on time as opposed to those who come late. And I think we have a quorum.
Yeah. It's steering. I mean, it's not the same quorum as
Right. It's not.
Correct.
Got a
Quorum at steering is a majority of the committees.
Right.
Not necessarily the population.
Ah,
Well, I didn't know that before.
I learn something new every time I'm here.
Is that in the bylaws?
I thought, well,
Probably.
they're handy somewhere, but Susan's here, so
No,
if
it's
it's
not.
not,
but it
if it's
sounds
not,
like it.
we'll talk to Susan and it'll become the bylaws somehow or other. The idea was, as I recall, was that you don't punish a committee that only has one chair as opposed to two co-chairs by giving more votes to the better represented committees, but, or anyway, you get the idea.
Yeah.
But that said, it's 6:32. We have 26 members of our board who are with us, excuse me, 27, because I got to promote Josh.
We only need a quorum of the steering committee.
Correct, and I believe we have it. So I'm going to call us to order, and thank you all for joining the meeting tonight. There are some important things to discuss. I hope it won't be the longest of all meetings, but given my track record, I'll find a way. The first order of business, and the thing that I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to discuss and understand, is preparation for the district needs statement. And rather than have me say things that I'm sure Cindy's going to say only better, why don't I just give the floor to Cindy right now? So Cindy, if you would unmute and take us through whatever it is that you need us to understand, both about the narrative district needs statement and about the preparation for the budget priorities that need to be voted on at the October steering committee so that we can vote on them at full board in November. I'm stalling for time so that Cindy can plug in, but I think she is now plugged in.
Yeah, I am.
And so Cindy, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Okay. I realized I didn't want to bother my family with listening to things about the DNS.
They're not
Well,
interested in the dulcet tones of
I don't
community-
know. But anyway, I wanted to just say, I hope everybody had a nice summer. I can't believe it's September and school's starting tomorrow. So that's crazy. It seems like only yesterday it was mid-March. Okay, so I wanted to just give a little bit of an overview of the DNS, even though we've done this before. Some of us were on a webinar that the Department of City Planning held on Thursday, the 10th, which was then followed the next day, which Mark and I attended, a full day borough consultation session with some of the different agencies. So one of the things that city planning went through was talking about the timeline. And they talked about attending the borough budget consultations in September and how our community boards need to schedule meetings for review and votes on the issues, the needs, and the budget requests, which is what we're kicking off now. And that internally, we're supposed to be collecting input and enlisting support from elected officials and stakeholders on our key priorities. So my hope is that many, if not all, of the committees have reached out to maybe elected officials or NGOs or any other groups you can think of for input in order to help formulate your district needs statement and budget priorities. Not all committees have budget priorities. For example, BCI has a district needs statement, but there aren't really particular budget priorities that fit into the slots that we're given for requesting different agencies for funding. Next month, we will be, I guess, Mark and I will be sharing the resources and the feedback that we got from the agency consultations. I will tell you that, I don't know about you, Mark, but my impression, you wouldn't believe that we were in the middle of a budget crisis at this borough consultation. I don't think, because every time the agencies were asked, what do you need? Are you going to be able to, what would you need to do things the way you've been doing them? What would you need in order to hit your benchmarks? They said, we think we're going to do that. Am I wrong, Mark? Did you hear anything different?
For most of the agencies that were on the call, there were about about 7 agencies last Friday, and not a one of them said, "Oh my God, we're going down the tubes." It was rather a remarkable thing. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I was honestly kind of shocked, but I don't know. I don't know why that's the case. So I can't even guess. Next month, we need to refine what our most pressing needs and priorities are. So I'm sure most of you who are on the board last year will recall that during steering, we were voting on top priorities. The board has to decide on what our number one priority is. Like the majority of community boards last year, our top priority was a housing issue. Okay, but there are other choices. We can have it be whatever we want. So everybody should start thinking about that. I'm pretty sure I sent out the list of the different possibilities for priorities for each area. But I can do that again if people want me to. I'm happy to do that. And again, it can always be other. So we're not really hamstrung by the choices that we're given. Then we ultimately have to ratify our final budget priorities during a public hearing. And my understanding coming into this role last year was that in the past, and what we did last year was our first November meeting, we held that vote. And even though the actual submissions are due October 30th, I think historically it's been fine with planning to have us submit that, but everything else has to be nailed down. I mean, it will be nailed down by October 30th, whether the committees give us stuff or we have to write it ourselves, it's going to be submitted. You know, I'm like, that's the drop dead date. So if we don't receive, DNS from, description from a committee, we'll look at what we had last year. We'll, to the best of our ability as a committee, and the committee, as you know, is Mark and Roberta and Beverly and I. To the best of our ability as a committee, we will write something. But the preference, of course, is to have broad input by as many people as possible, both on the board and in the community. So our real hope is that we will ultimately get something in writing from everyone. I've gotten some. I've gotten from BCI. I've gotten some from YEL, but I'm not 100% happy with the lack of response, can't lie. But this will get done one way or another. And then in November, OMB actually distributes our budget priorities to the agencies, which is why that deadline of October, early November is so important. And then city planning distributes the citywide community board perspective reports to the agencies, and the agencies review and respond to the budget requests prior to the preliminary budget. One of the things that city planning told us was that we have a unique opportunity this year to have our opinions considered more so than other years, because they're going to be making tough budget decisions in a tight time frame. And this will be a document that ostensibly reflects the will of the community. And I think that when you have to make a tough decision, it's a lot easier to make it with the strength of some support than to just make it, without that. So that was something that they highlighted. They also said it's very essential to refresh content. So if you have data, dates or numbers or whatever in your narrative, in your district needs statement narrative, portion of the narrative, please make sure that you've done your best to make sure it's up to date. And the same with budget requests, to the extent that you can get hard numbers, obviously that's important. One of the things they also stressed was location. So if we can give an address for a particular school, or at least name the school, or the more specific we can be, and the more supporting information we can give. They said that that it was definitely a more compelling statement if you had a supporting letter or organizations to which you can point and say they are in support of this, or they brought this to the board's attention. They also said that it's important to tie content between the various elements of our submission, that it makes it a more cohesive report. That's not on you, that's on our committee, because we're going to be taking what you give us and trying to do that. They talked in terms of sending surveys to the broader community, although one of the district managers did point out that there are a lot of people who don't have access to computers and internet, and so it is difficult to send out like a SurveyMonkey survey to the broader community, because we may be forgetting about people, or there may be people who don't have access. So something we can think about. I don't think there's time for a survey right now anyway, but maybe going forward, or if you've done surveys already, you certainly can include those in your submissions. Trying to see what else that they said that was really important. Yeah, they mentioned affordable housing was #1 in Manhattan. There is they've produced a lot of background. They have a document with tips for strengthening your submissions. Anybody who wants any of that stuff, I've got it, and I could easily send it on to you, or I could send it to everybody. It's whatever you want. One of the things
Why don't you share that with everybody, just
I
so
will.
everybody's got it
Okay.
in front? Yeah.
Okay, so I got an email after this webinar, which again, they also have, there's slides. They produced a deck, and everybody can look at this. After the webinar, they sent out, yeah, there you go, Christian. You got it too, because you went to the webinar, right?
Yes.
So yes, so this webinar, so we have this, and Christian, did you see the other documents that they attached to, that they gave links to?
I didn't yet. No.
Okay, so within the text of the email, there are
Yeah.
other documents that you can click and look at, and there's some helpful stuff in there. I mean, it basically just says do a very good job. But anyway, another thing that one of the things they emphasize, though, and it's something that I think our committee has been emphasizing this year too, is that if you can identify external stakeholders, it can change an agency's maybe to a yes. That, for what it's worth, that's what city planning was saying. And they of course want to hear what our means of outreach are. If they can help to collect and share best practices, they want to do that. I think that if we have any problems gathering data, planning is available. Mark, I don't know if you'd like me to be or you to be a conduit to planning, or if you want to encourage different committees to reach out directly, or.
Thanks. I defer to you on what you think is most efficient with respect to city planning. With respect to other agencies, especially the agencies to which each committee naturally corresponds or relates, I don't think they need to go through either of us to reach out to their counterparts. A streamlined approach where you have a good rapport with your corresponding agency is of course ideal, and I would encourage everybody to do that within the framework of whatever makes sense for your committee.
Yeah, and I'm happy to have people reach out to city planning, and I can give you email addresses. They were sending them out. I mean, you'll see them on the email that I send out, but I wouldn't mind being copied on emails that you send. I mean, if you call, obviously I'm not part of the phone call, but if you send an email, I wouldn't mind being copied just so that I can see what the conversation is. But if you don't do it, I won't be hurt. Don't worry. So the plan now, I'm hoping that I was hoping to have drafts today, but I don't have them. So what I'm going to ask everybody to do is take a look at your last year's submission. If you want to do this the quickest way possible, make it as up to date as you can. Bring in as much data and outside support as you can. Give as much detail as you can, and get it to me as fast as you can, so that I don't have to do this on October 29th at midnight. And that's, I guess, is there anything else, Mark?
Thank you, Cindy. That's perfect. I just will emphasize one or two things. There are two basic buckets into which this work fits. One is the narrative statement of district needs, and the other is the budget priorities that your committee decides upon, and then they become the fodder for a unified list of budget priorities for the whole board. What Cindy was talking about in terms of the top three was that the form, the online form into which, God bless her, she's the one who inputs all these narrative statements, calls for each board to have an overall top three needs. And as she was saying, last year, the top need was, or at least one of the top needs was affordable housing.
Our number one was.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that recurred. That will be discussed at the October steering committee along with the budget priorities. While the budget priorities need to be, thank you, Christian.
Thanks.
While the budget priorities need to be voted on at November full board, I, both out of gratitude for Cindy and the committee for taking on this very difficult and time-consuming task, and because we've been kind of working on this a while now, the narrative statements should be done, please, by October steering. I was going to say by October full board, but I'm being realistic, because that would give us an opportunity as a committee to assemble our own standalone document, as well as input the relevant sections into the right parts of the online form that Cindy was showing, and that actually Christian is now showing you. So that's all I've got to add to Cindy, unless I missed something.
I think that's it. Roberta and Beverly, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Roberta, you have to unmute.
So I want to remind everybody that the economic downturn is going to be going on for quite a few years. So programs that are being cut across the board. So be especially mindful of cuts. I'm looking at Andrew and Albert and thinking about the MTA, but there are other agencies throughout our board that will be harmed by what's going on.
Well, I read YEL's submission today. I got some stuff from Blanche and then some stuff from Steve, and they for sure, COVID's all over it, which I think is great, and it does talk about lack of access to internet, lack of access to technology, hardware, lack of, just all of it. So I think they did a very good job reflecting, and BCI also mentioned brought the COVID. You can't not. And again, according to planning, the agencies are going to actually be looking at this probably in November. Unless they just decide they don't want to look at it at all, but that would really hurt our feelings very badly. So if they look at it, if this year, we may actually have a chance to really emphasize what's important to us as a district.
I see Paige's hand.
Yeah, I also have a question after Paige.
A few things. First of all, Cindy, thank you very much for sending me the buildings department, and I think you sent me city planning, preservation, LPC. The one thing that was missing there, and this is one quick question, does the BSA, Board of Standards and Appeals, actually have any role in this? Okay.
I don't remember them. Are they one of the agencies, Mark, that comes to?
They have never come to budget consultation. If any of the committees would like to develop a budget priority around what BSA can or should be doing, or a need statement, we certainly could include that in the right place.
Okay, because here's the issue. From our Super Tolls meetings that we used to host at Landmark West last year, the common complaint was the BSA is very slow. It's 5 people. If one person is sick, nothing happens. And for 66th Street, Landmark West attorneys have been waiting now, we're into month 9 of a decision of what's happening on 66th Street. So we can't go to court, we can't file an Article 78, et cetera. So one question is, I'm trying to get my arms around this and not make it too difficult. But I think the BSA, not that I want to throw them under a bus, but they're not doing their job because city planning can't make their decisions, and neither can preservation, because the other issue that I want to table, and I don't know if it's something that I'd like to reach out with Jay and Michelle, is air rights transfers, because that's why we're getting these ziggurat, upside down ziggurat buildings and cantilevers. So I need help. I see Seema's on tonight because I need to touch base with her as well. But is this something that we can, Jay and Michelle would be willing to work with me on certain areas that impact city planning?
You're one letter off. It's K, not J.
K. I'm sorry, K.
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 Sure.
I can't do anyway. Because
K, you know, it's all.
K, K.
Any letter, just pick one.
Well, you can tell how tired I am. I'm so tired.
Oh, Paige. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think it would be good to share, because I was shocked by the DOB. That was so detailed, and the city and the preservation, I'm afraid, is going to get axed every time there's a downturn. They always want to cut staff and not designate and do everything. So I think
Paige, on that one, let me bring you up to date about their budget consultation from last Friday, which is that they are down 5 staff members. Somebody needs to mute themselves because there's some sort of feedback here. But they're down 5 staff members and there's a hiring freeze. But other than that, they have informed us that they can keep their staff. So I see a couple of more hands. Let's go to those. Christian was next, and then I see Bev and Stephen.
Just first of all, I want to say that Cindy and her team have done an excellent job, and they always, ever since Cindy came into the board and took over budget, it's been excellent work. I thought that we needed to have all the budget priorities ready for October steering because we need to vote on them. Right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so basically, we really have to have everything ready by then.
We need to decide them in October steering. Well, I mean, the full board votes on it. You can't just do it at steering.
I know in November, but in steering, we decide the first 10 priorities normally.
Right. Yes, that's correct.
You need to come to October steering with your budget priorities done. And while you might have a little bit of grace period with respect to the written narrative part of it, that needs to be done more or less at the same time as well. Cindy, if it's okay with you, I'll just call on Beverly and then Stephen.
Yeah, I'm sort of taken with the calendar right now because November has become incredibly important for several reasons. First, it looks like agencies will begin to see our priorities at that point in time. It's also the time when the state will have to make decisions about whether or not federal aid is going to fill the state budget gap, thereby permitting them to avoid further cuts to the city. And in addition to that, the city in its January plan will have to accommodate whatever the state then does. So it could very well be that instead of being a 2022 fiscal year needs reflection, it could very well be in the current year that what we put on paper makes a real difference. So I just want to point out that this has some immediate consequences as well.
I think you're right.
Thank you. Stephen?
Yeah, sort of a two-part question. Cindy, I just wanted to follow up on that email, which was about budgets. I mean, we we didn't put budgets. It seemed more like it would be throwing a dart on the wall, and wanted to get your feedback if that's necessary. And then the next one is maybe broader for you or Mark. I'm just curious. I'd be curious. Have we ever seen any of our priorities in the past years being sort of acted on? And are we sure? I mean, I'm just curious about the process. So I'm curious.
Well, I did
see
send,
something worked on, and was there an interaction in it? Just curious.
I
about
did send we get agency responses every year to our requests, to our budget requests. And generally they say, we need to study this, or we don't have sufficient money at the time, or go to your council member and see if they have some money. Generally the answer, or we've already started doing this. So I had sent out some of those. I think I sent them to the appropriate committee people.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get confused where the lines get drawn and whose agencies go where. And sometimes I send it to multiple people because I'm not sure. But if you take a look at that, and again, that's another thing I can send out is the responses from last year's. If you take a look at that, you'll see that no, pretty much no. The answer is no. Am I wrong, Mark?
No, well, to the extent that things are acted on, it is the last of those things that Cindy mentioned, that that council members with their member items, or the borough president with her funding available, will sometimes look to our statement of priorities as to when they are deciding among different projects to fund.
And then as far as putting the dollar figure on, last year, some of our budget requests did have a dollar figure attached to them. And that was just because I got those figures from the committees. I don't have any special idea of how much things cost. My assumption, may hope that was correct, was that they had spoken to agencies or elected officials or someone who knew what the dollar figure was for that. I know with some of your stuff, like Steve, with your stuff, when you're talking in terms of making sure people have sufficient, laptops or whatever it is, as I was reading it, I was thinking, well, I guess we're thinking in terms of our district, right? What are our district needs?
Yeah.
But you're really thinking, so is it that number, or is it the number for all of Manhattan? Or is it the number for, the whole Department of Education? So, I mean, I think we could just specify that if we have a number. We've also made submissions that didn't have a number attached because we really didn't know, and you would hope that the agencies will know what the number is. I mean, my feeling is you just do your best. I know, Beverly, I know you've been involved in budget. Maybe you have a sense of how much some of that stuff costs for education or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't get numbers from the agency, it's sort of hard to come up with cost factors that are reliable. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the answer is, number one, you could go to planning and ask them, can you help us get this information from the agencies if you're not having any luck with the agencies? Go to maybe the elected officials and see if they can help you get through the agency, or if you have a connection, like I know Clary has worked with Parks for many years, she has a relationship with them, go directly to your and hope that they can get it for you. But that's really, I mean, do your best. I mean, we don't have the authority to order people to do stuff. We're just a volunteer community board. So all we can do is try a few different methods. Like I know I worked on participatory budgeting, and it was the same kind of thing. The community comes to the council member and says, we need computers for PS 75. And they don't just put that on the ballot. What we did was we went back to the agency and said, okay, how much does that cost? So then we could determine whether or not it was appropriate for participatory budgeting. And then also we could put it on the ballot. We needed to have a number because you're voting on the number. So I think this is similar to that, where we can think of what the thing is. And a lot of people in the community have ideas about how money should be spent. But at the end of the day, as Beverly said, the only way to get the answer to how much is that, what is that going to cost, is go right to the agency, which is then the agency that's going to later on, when they said their responses, say there's insufficient money for this in our budget. So it's kind of, we're spinning around a little bit, but I do think, as Beverly said, it's important this year particularly to at least let them know what our priorities are, so that hopefully in making their decisions, they will consider that.
Great.
Sorry, that was long-winded.
No, that's great. Thanks. And Melissa's got her hand up.
Just a quick technical question, and pardon if you said this, I'm a little brain dead tonight. What's the best way to submit to you the budget items, because they'll be entered into a form?
Yeah, just any way that's good for you. I mean, a lot of people send a Word document, and I can just, because it has to be, there's a lot of like little click off things and little boxes to fit stuff in. Anything where I can cut and paste is helpful so that I could take the verbiage, cut it, and then paste it into the document.
So Excel or Word?
I mean, I prefer a Word document or or even you could put, even in an email, as long as I can just take I'm not that particular. It doesn't help me one way or another as far as I can tell.
And sorry, repeat one more time. What's our deadline? I guess it was yesterday.
Well, so now Mark is saying by steering.
By steering,
month.
we have to be able to be ready to vote. So you really need to have everything done by then, is what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'd prefer coming in dribs and drabs so that I can, if I see stuff that I think is not going to fit in, if I think there's some way that this doesn't really fit in with the form, I don't know. I don't know what it would be that I would see, but I like to have things a little bit ahead of time. So again, I'm not at midnight in my pajamas trying to figure stuff out or make things up. I mean, eventually I have to fit things into the document. So the sooner I can get started on that, the happier I will be.
Anybody else, or are we ready to move on? So thank you very much, Cindy. That's
Thank you.
great.
Thank you very much for taking the time
Doug's
to
got his
listen.
hand up. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, I just sent in the chat. I just wanted to understand what when you were attending the webinar, what they meant by external stakeholders, and if you can give an example of that.
Like my impression was like the community like the PTA
Riverside.
or
yeah.
Huh? Yeah, PTA. What do you call it?
CBO.
CBO. Or Goddard Riverside is an external stakeholder.
External, okay, even though they're in our district, but they're an external stakeholder.
External to, I think it's just external to the community board.
Right.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you for the effort that we know is coming. And I'll do my best to share the load, but you did such a good job last year that you earned the reward for hard work is more hard work. Okay, I'm going to move us along a little bit. Josh is with us and has an update on the roster of candidates for board office. Josh, can you unmute and give us the update?
Yes, Seema is going to withdraw her candidacy for vice chair. So it looks like all of the races will be uncontested, but we still need to have a vote because we do need to receive a majority for each office. We also have the election committee, which is going to be myself, Barbara Adler, Susan Schwartz, Christian, and Richard Robbins. So the 5 of us will have to count the votes in uncontested races for majorities. And we're working on a system of how to do that, which we will have by full board in October.
Yeah, let's try to have it a week before so we can share it with everybody.
Send it out to everybody.
See
Yep.
what it looks like. One of the ways that apparently will work, we have borough board this coming Thursday. So we will use that as an opportunity to see if the borough president's office and Noel from Beta NYC has come up with a template. Otherwise, we will use the template that Christian and Rich were working on. And something tells me that the template that Christian and Rich were working on is going to be very similar to the one that Noel had anyway. That's the update there. Just like the election in November, it is important that everybody vote, even though because it is possible to lose an uncontested election. I will, anyway, that's all I'll say about that. And I thank I see Shelley's hand. I thank the election committee and the newly appointed members of the election committee for their service in this regard, because it's important to have, a button down process. and we will get us there despite the fact that we're doing this online. Shelley, do you have something you want to unmute? Shelley, you need to unmute.
Like to point out that the November meeting will not be on November 3rd,
Thank you. I was getting there, but go right ahead.
but it should, according to our bylaws, it should be November 4th.
And it will be. Yeah, I was going to raise that later in the meeting, but since we're right here, we should not and will not hold a full board meeting on election day. So the November meeting will be the first Wednesday instead of the first Tuesday. That's the, we were incredibly lucky this year in that religious observances so far at least have not occasioned the need to reschedule any of our committees, but election day is election day and we should all be cognizant of that. I'm looking at the agenda. I have an item here about supporting community and block association efforts. And I guess one of the things that I want us to be able to be in a better position to do is to correspond with block associations on a global basis. We have a database. We have hired somebody to help us make better use of that database, and we will be rolling that out. But meanwhile, any of you who have a block association on your block, if you could send me the contact information for that, I would be grateful. I will store it and share it with as many of you as want the list. But we'll have sort of an informal list going, and then when we can do a better formal list, we will of course do that. One of the things that we spent our extra money, if you want to call it that, in previous fiscal years is on building a database, and now we have spent some of that money on hiring the builder of the database to finish that work. There's going to be a group of folks who have been continuing to work on that. I'm looking at Roberta Seymour up, and there goes her hand. So Roberta, among others, is going to be helping us make sure that that process follows through on the promise that that it holds for us. Roberta, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I do. I do have it in the database. I already have some block associations. The problem is it was last updated in 2009. Noel and his team did some work on the block association. And what I need basically right now is any current updates with, mostly people give out their email. We don't really need phone numbers. We basically, if there's a name, we need the name, but many block associations just have one generic email.
So thank you. So if you would forward that information, if you have it, to both Roberta and me, that would be great. Thank you. Doug is asking if we want tenant associations as well. I would say yes, more is better. So let's try to.
Absolutely. Tenants associations, co-ops.
Yeah, whatever you got.
This database can hold a lot of information, and we do have some of it, but as I said, some of it was last updated in 2009, and a lot has happened since then.
Thank you.
And I want to thank Kay. Kay gave us a great list of religious institutions, which has been a big help. We just need to finish inputting that.
Terrific. Thanks. Okay, unless there are further questions, I'm going to move us along here. And the next is agenda item has to do with full board meeting planning, and that was where I was going to mention November, but we've already covered that, so I'm moving on. Okay, so are you? Thank you, Christian. Okay, there are. It looks like this is the agenda as it exists now, except that there is a transportation resolution that didn't make it onto this draft. It will be added, obviously before October. Go ahead.
Also, the BCI, the 153, 155 was withdrawn, so that shouldn't be on the agenda.
Very good. So Christian, if you would send a note to Penny and me
Sure.
by email to confirm that, just so we don't forget.
Mark,
So
can you tell us what the subject of the transportation item is?
Andrew, do you want to take that?
Sure. It's something that we've taken up over the years, but there's a new push because Community Board 4 has also asked for the Department of Transportation to not have a sponsor for a curb extension. They
right.
have long insisted on one. So it's about the southwest corner of 96th and West End Avenue, and we're asking for them to do the curb extension without a sponsor.
Got it. That, we discussed that at the meeting. Thanks,
Yep.
Andrew.
Sure.
Okay. So that's the agenda. It doesn't, dangerous words, but it doesn't look like there's a showstopper resolution among those. I'm always live to regret saying those words. So we'll try to make the October meeting move along that way. One of the things that I've been asked in recent weeks to work on is the order of public comment. Those of you who were on either the information session for the hotel issues or the most recent full board saw me try to move elected officials along in a way that you've never seen me move them along before. Thus empowered and emboldened, I'm going to try my luck at that again. But more to the point, what I'm going to try to do is I've been asking them since we went on Zoom to zoom in, if you'll pardon that expression, at a particular hour. And I'm going to continue to do that, but I'm going to push that hour later so that the public has more of a chance to speak before the electeds do. I'm going to at least try this out for October. The idea being that we would have the elected officials hear the community and then respond, rather than and try to make us their last stop, rather than bouncing from one meeting to another, which I know that they need to do. Of course, we will be hospitable hosts for those that need to do a quick drive-by. But that's my goal, is to try to move us into that framework, because the public is feeling a little bit like they get the last, the last word, when the last word on the one hand, but when no one's listening is on the other. It's not true, because I've been incredibly proud of all of our colleagues who have stayed on our meetings till the bitter end. It's a full screen and screen or two screens. So I don't think that anybody can point that finger at our board, but sometimes they want to be heard not just by us, but by each other and the electeds. So this is going to be my next attempt to try to make that happen. And we can talk about how well that goes at October steering. We've just taken a look at the October agenda, and we're going to add the transportation resolution and subtract one BCI resolution, but I think that's basically it. I want to call to your attention, I will be circulating by the end of the week, or as soon as I can. There was an amendment or modification to the bylaws amendment that Susan Schwartz and I collaborated on about voting procedure. Remember, there's no provision in the voting procedures in the bylaws for voting online, precisely because there was no provision for holding a meeting online. So we have that, and the amendment was, I believe Christian, among others, suggested that we not time limit it to a period of months, but say for whenever it is appropriate and allowed to take a vote on an election during a remote meeting or a virtual meeting, that these would be the procedures. And remember that we have a bylaws committee that will be taking up a thoroughgoing review of all of the bylaws. So this still will be an interim measure, because the hope is that we will come up with a complete discussion of all of the bylaws and how they interact with one another, including, of course, the voting procedures. And I'm seeing Susan nodding her head, so I thank you for that. And that, I understand, Susan will be reconvening that task force in the coming weeks or a couple of months. And so I thank you for that. Anyway, so I think that's all there is to say about that. I'll get that out. I'm going to run the new text by Susan, ask you to make sure that I captured it correctly. Christian, if I could look to you for that as well, just to make sure that I've captured it correctly, and then we will share it with not just all of you, but the full board. Any questions or concerns about full board meeting planning? I do have a couple of new business items, and there's been one person who's has requested an opportunity to speak, so don't run away. I see Kay with his hand literally raised, not virtually.
Yeah, Mark, I put it in the chat, but I think we can take the preservation item off because of the timing of Landmarks Commission. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. It is
We're gonna do it.
important. It is important for our board to vote on resolutions, even if LPC has already heard the
It's already
matter.
heard. Okay.
The reason is that we want to be consistent with how we do our business. So we don't want to set a precedent that doesn't come before the full board.
Fair enough.
So we don't have to belabor it, but we certainly should take a vote on it.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
And I don't see any other hands raised. Whoops, Susan has got her hand raised, so please go ahead.
I got a quick question. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but there's no agenda listed for the HHS meeting later in the month. I'm just wondering if anyone knows, has an agenda for that yet or could share it.
Sure. It's almost devoted totally to the DNS. We have 6 different people working on different aspects, actually 7. And they're going to report and share, and we're going to give each other feedback and finalize our statement and work on the budget priorities and numbers to the extent we could get them. So that's the agenda. It should be on. We had originally sent in that it would be the DNS, but then I believe Catherine sent in the list of the topics. No, it's the 7 topics.
It hasn't made it into the website yet.
This is about a week and a half ago.
So Shelley, let's you and I tomorrow get something up on the website to
Okay.
reflect the agenda. That's all. That doesn't have to be the 7 topics, just that's what the agenda will be.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Susan. Don't see any other hands. I'm going to scroll real quick here in case anybody's raising their hand physically, but I don't see it. So I'm going to move us along to effectively new business. One item of new business, I just want to remind everybody, because there's been a lot of controversy in the district. You may have heard or read about some of it. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about speaking on behalf of the board. When we speak on behalf of the board, it needs to clear through me or whoever is the right person. I will certainly delegate to the appropriate committee chair on committee business and encourage committee chairs to be the spokesperson for the board on the appropriate matters. But let's please make sure that we talk to each other about that because casual conversations in the hands of the media sometimes become statements that sound like they are on behalf of all of us. So I just a gentle reminder about that, please. Jay Adolph asked for an opportunity to speak, and after that, I have a couple of points for you about Borough Board this coming Thursday. So please stay tuned after Jay.
Mark, I see Luisa had her hand raised for a question.
I'm sorry.
Luisa had her hand raised for a question. What you had just said.
Okay, I didn't hear who it was, but whoever it is, please. Oh, Louisa, thank you. Go ahead, Louisa.
I was just wondering if we have a statement on the situation.
The situation meaning the use of the hotels for the protection
Absolutely.
of. We do not have a board position on that. Shelley is waving his hand. I see you.
Do we want to?
My personal view is that we are performing a very important function of trying to participate in identification of issues and bringing people together to try to address those issues on a case-by-case basis. And we are in a situation where there is an awful lot of dissension in our community and a lot of misinformation in our community. And we perform a very important role by being facilitators of conversations rather than advocates. So that would be my suggestion for you. But I see Shelley's hand and there may be other hands after that. Shelley, please unmute.
I agree with Will's position, but I'd like to point out that the board voted on the whole topic, I believe in May or June. We encouraged the mayor to use, for the use of hotels to deal with congregate settings where people were in danger health-wise. Now, he took a long time to do it in certain cases, but we supported that, but on the condition that it was with health aides or nurses providing food, providing social services. The fact that perhaps in one, at least, situation, the execution of it was very poor and non-consultative, and the preparation apparently was not good, doesn't negate the fact that we, I think, unanimously approved the health situation during COVID, the use of the hotels for this purpose.
Thank you, Shelley. And that just points out even starker relief. Louisa, I'll get right back to you. It points out in starker relief how the devil can be in the details, that you can be for something that makes a world of sense and still have issues with how it's done. And that's where I think we add our best value right now, but that's just my view. Louisa, you want to continue?
Well, just that the situation has changed, and the point is, do we support keeping homeless in the hotels in our community board rather than doing this kind of round robin that the mayor had advocated?
Well, first of all, and I see Linda's hand, and I'll take a few more. First of all, I have no confidence that we've heard the last of any of this. That the situation seems to change every day. So one of the things that I would fear is taking a position on a set of facts that will be misconstrued to relate to a new set of facts as they change tomorrow. And I think, again, that we do a better service by trying to connect people and information and resources than locking ourselves into a particular volatile situation. Linda, did you have your hand up? And then I'll take other hands.
And just very quickly, I don't think we can take a position on this in terms of the number of people in the hotels. Right now, it's moot because the mayor's decided that they're going to stay there, and he was playing a round robin anyway with moving them, relocating them from one hotel to another. But I think the issue really is about transparency from DHS, and that's our biggest issue. And we suddenly had 686 folks brought into the neighborhood at one time with no oversight, no consultation, no transparency to the community board, our elected officials. That's untenable. And I think that's the issue that we can stand on. But I think the Upper West Siders for Safer Streets and the Upper West Side Community Group, they've got a handle on it with their own opinion. But we're a community board that represents everyone. And I think the biggest issue is the fact that we kind of got blindsided, and it's been going on for 20 years, and it shouldn't be going on at all. So it's got to stop. So that I would take a position on.
But perhaps not now. Maybe when this is all said and done would be the right time to think about that, because there may be more curveballs coming our way. I see Clary has her hand up, and I'm going to call on her, and then I'm not sure if we'll be ready to move on.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think Mark is exactly right, that we have what we've been doing is great. Actually, we have repeatedly facilitated in one central place and convenient place for people to congregate on Zoom. Extensive discussions where we have brought together anybody in our community that wanted to talk about this ongoing, changing everyday situation. That's exactly what we should be doing. We're still doing it. Not only do they express their views, but as Mark pointed out, we spend all night ourselves listening to them, which is part of what we do. But I agree with Mark that it would be just a huge mistake for us to take a substantive position, aside from the fact that the facts change every day.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to weigh in on this? I don't want to shortcut this important discussion, but I also don't want to take more time than needs. Doug has got his hand up.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to say that perhaps what we could take positions on are secondary and tertiary issues without weighing in on an opinion specifically. For example, we all are against any crime in the neighborhood that may be related to this, or additional services in congregate settings where appropriate, if they are there. So there are, I think there's a whole set and subset of issues that are that you unanimously would be agreed upon, and safety is one of them, without taking a position on whether or not the hotels are being used or not. Does that make sense?
Again, I don't want this to be a dialogue between me and everybody. So I think we all hear you. I'm not sure there's any move right now to do anything different. But this absolutely will be topics for continued conversation as we move forward.
Yeah, I didn't mean tonight. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And I see Susan, go ahead.
I know that you've been having what are called small group meetings with various stakeholders in this, but I'm wondering if we should perhaps have this on our agenda for the full board meeting so that the community feels at large that they can be heard, because I've heard comments from a number of people that they feel that those smaller group meetings are really contained and there's not been a kind of open forum the way we had, for example, with the equally contentious issue, which is Museum of Natural History, where we had many meetings that were very open. So I know that you know, there might be dissension within the board about how we feel about this, but in our role as being able to provide a platform where everyone can feel like they're heard, it might be something we might want to consider for the October full board meeting to put that on the agenda, particularly given that the agenda is relatively lean right now, and that would be a nice opening.
Okay, I'll certainly consider that. We have a public comment session. I'm mindful of the fact that we had an information session with 1,389 people present. Very different takeaways from that experience, depending on where you might have found yourself in that dialogue. We had a full hour of that kind of comment at September full board. And if we had another hour of that at October full board, I would be delighted. I think we need to be careful on what we can realistically deliver in terms of in-person open mic conversations. The small group meetings don't work in a big group setting. You can't have 1,300 people come to what is effectively a community advisory board kind of meeting. Although the borough president's office, with our support, has done a pretty good job of making sure that key stakeholders are there. So we'll continue to do our best. I don't know if those are going to continue, by the way, because I'm not sure that the service providers will have a heart for continuing to discuss how to make things better in hotels that they're expecting to be kicked out of at any minute. So
I'm more thinking, Mark, about the community at large having an opportunity to let the community board know how they feel about what's going on a day-to-day basis. You know, where we are at the time of October full board might be very different from where we are right this moment or where we were a month ago. That's all. It might be something to consider, because to leave it just as open as it's the community session, people can know to come or not come, is very different from putting on the agenda as an actual item and saying, this is something we're welcoming comments on. It's just a thought.
Thank you for that. I won't belabor the point, and maybe we can talk a little bit offline about what that would look like, because I'm not sure I have a precedent for that. But doesn't mean it can't be done. I see Cindy with her hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I understand where Susan's coming from, but I think if you put that on the agenda, you need to make sure that there are people there who can answer questions with facts, who are from, you know, different agencies, from the service provider. So if you put it on the agenda and you don't have anybody there to speak to it who's dealing with it as an agency or as a service provider, then what are we doing? Why are we, you know, it'll just be us listening and having no one to really respond. So I think I hear your point, but I think it's more of an open forum so that the electeds will be there and they can hear it. That's all. It's not a time to have answers.
Assuming that the electeds are there. So let's work on that a little bit. I think the point is made for this group, and then how we go forward from here is something we should talk about. But I'm open to at least having a discussion. I thought we had all the hands, but I'm looking at the list here and it looks like Ken has his hand up. Ken, can you unmute?
Yes, I just wanted to say that this is the biggest issue that has come before our community in a number of years, and certainly the most public profile one citywide. And it just seems amazing that we haven't taken a position on it. We've taken positions on many other controversial issues. And if we had taken a position earlier, the mayor might not have felt emboldened to do what he did last week.
If you have a window into the mayor's thinking, I would encourage anybody to share.
It might have helped.
Thank you, Ken. Howard.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there's more to it than just getting information. People in the community may want to advocate that the community board take a position on it. So that may be a motivation for a lot of people as well. So some people may be interested in information. Some people may be interested in basically supporting what Ken just said, advocating that the community board have a position, because it is obviously a very critical issue facing the community. So there are all sorts of motivations for attending a meeting, and many people may not be particularly interested in information. They may be, again, interested in getting us to do something. That's
Thank
all.
you. Very good. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah.
That's, Elizabeth, are you raising your hand, Elizabeth?
I am, but if somebody else did it before, that's fine. Like Howard, I agree with what you're saying, but I also think we have a responsibility as a board to be a convener. And there are plenty of groups right now. Many of you are involved in some of them that are taking a very activist approach on one side or another. I think for us to get engaged in that, we've already done it. We've hosted numerous meetings. We've hosted hours and hours of conversations about this. I would really like for our board to be a source of knowledge and resources and whatnot, but not to have, I think to have us sort of weigh in on an activist side, one side or another is really tough for us right now. And I'm not sure that that's something that the Community Board 7 should be doing. So that's all.
Okay, I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to turn to Jay, who wanted to make a statement. And then I have a couple of questions and or updates that relate to Borough Board, so please stay tuned.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Mark, for giving me, excuse me, a couple of minutes. What I have to say is somewhat related to the discussion that just preceded it, but I asked Mark for the opportunity to talk to the steering committee, and I would have done so to the full board, but I wanted to do so now. And I want everybody to understand that despite the fact that we often have disagreement on a whole host of issues, I sincerely wanted to speak to you guys because notwithstanding any disagreements that we have from time to time, all of us as volunteers on the board and residents of the West Side and of the city, I sincerely believe always have the best of intentions and a sincere desire to do what we think is best for the welfare of our community and the city as a whole. I've been a West Sider for a long time. I think probably more than anyone else on this board, more than 50 years. And I've been a city resident all my life, including the time I took to raise 3 children in this city. I think, frankly, that our city is in a dangerous decline. I've lived through the financial crisis of the 70s when much of the West Side was unsafe. The streets were often filled with garbage, used crack vials, broken automobile windows along the curbs, etc. And through those years, a lot of families like mine with young children were fleeing the city, including our neighborhood. But I personally made a decision to stay. I've also been here while the neighborhood, along with so many in the city, recovered and became a desirable and attractive place to live. Lately, I've become concerned and anxious about the future of our community and the city of a whole. Our government and our local officials, in my opinion, on many issues have become tone deaf to the needs and concerns of a substantial number of our neighbors. The latest example, as the preceding discussion indicated, was the sheltering of homeless men throughout the district. A district that has always been concerned with inclusiveness and a willingness to help those needing help the most. Our neighbors who expressed genuine concerns for their children's safety, for the proliferation of offensive and dangerous conduct in our streets were, and who, in my opinion, justifiably became very angry at not having been involved in the process, have been greeted by derision, accusations of racism, and NIMBYism, if, by the way, if that's a word, I'm not sure. But they have been by our elected officials, and I think sadly by some of our colleagues as well. The failure to consider the needs of all segments of our community has also occurred with regard to other issues. For example, the crusade to eliminate street parking where the needs of car owners were and continue to be ignored completely, where so-called open streets were established with no input whatsoever from the residents of those streets. And this week, as an example, again, with the scheduling of a fair on those open streets, which are supposed to be peaceful residential streets, not commercial avenues or parks. No input from the residents, many of whom were working from home, and oddly, according to some material I saw today, with sponsorship of CB7 with no public discussion that I'm aware of. People are again fleeing the city, many of them middle class, upper middle class, and frankly, wealthy. People who have a choice to leave and likely will do so more and more if the city continues on its present path. These are people who support the city directly by paying some of the highest taxes in the country and indirectly by supporting cultural and social institutions and local businesses. I'm saying all this not to stir up a debate, though I see that one kind of preceded it, but asking that we all consider the consequences of our actions and their effect on everyone in our community. Mark, thanks for giving me the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jay. I personally want to believe that we all have those best intentions and best interests of our neighbors at heart, especially when we disagree with one another on contentious issues. That is the soul of making sure that all voices are heard. And I want to believe that, I want to try to model that for myself, and I will take to heart what those sentiments and continue to value the diversity of opinion on our board. And unless I see another hand, which I'm going to quickly close my eyes so that I don't, I'm going to move us to the next part of the agenda, which is the Borough Board is this coming Thursday. And there are two resolutions that have been, that I got today. So I will be asked to vote on them on Thursday. One of them has to do with mayoral advisory boards and how there are no community board members from any Manhattan community board on any of them. We previously actually opined on this back in the spring, slightly differently phrased than the one that's going to be coming up on Thursday. But I'm going to vote in favor of a request that that the mayor include community board representatives on his reopening panels or his reopening committees to make sure that our voices are heard, and through us, our community's voices are heard. The second has to do with a proposal relating to Central Park. And under ordinary circumstances, I would like to have a committee vote on this, but like I said, I got this today and it's on the docket for Thursday. It involves what some of us may remember as the Central Park jogger case, with 5 young men who were, it turns out, wrongfully convicted of having taken part in that brutal attack, and were later exonerated, complete with a different person having confessed to the crime and having DNA evidence confirm that that confession was in fact not fabricated and indeed was valid, to the extent that our judicial system allows for that. There is a request that originated with Community Board 10 in Harlem to have some kind of commemoration or acknowledgement of what are now being called the exonerated 5, as opposed to the Central Park 5, in Central Park. The vote on Thursday will simply be to encourage the creation of such a thing. Those who are familiar with this process know that nothing would be erected in Central Park without multiple layers of review, including by the Landmarks Preservation Commission and of course the Public Design Commission, which has complete oversight over anything. And for those who were able, as I was, to go see after its dedication, that statue of the 3 suffragist pioneers, Susan B. Anthony, Sojourner Truth, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, know that that was the first new structure of any kind of commemoration in Central Park in 70 years. So there is a robust process about whatever this might end up looking like, where it would go, who would be involved in creating, designing, and implementing it. So it would be my intention, consistent with our core principles, to vote in favor of a resolution asking that process to continue, not necessarily, but mindful of the fact that whatever it would look like would be something that would be subject to considerable further discussion and debate. I see Clary's hand.
Right. So we live in a time now when everybody seems to be falling, including many of us, falling all over themselves to be what they perceive to be politically correct in the moment that we're in, even if they don't all agree on what that is. And certainly that is an explanation for this, and it was an important event, and it was that remains in our memories, and it was a severe miscarriage of justice, and that has fortunately been largely now rectified, and you can't give these guys their lives back, but has been recognized and to a large extent rectified. On the other hand, Central Park is not only formally a scenic landmark, but it was built and is intended to remain as a place of repose. The placement of the suffragette statue was in a location that had 100 years ago been longer than that actually, part of the literary walk where there was a single location symmetrical with others that had not been filled in with the statue, and that one was considered to be appropriate for there. I'm not saying at all that I disagree. I know certainly when we were considering our own board's position with regard to that statue, the designers, the planners at the Conservancy expressed the view to us that it was not appropriate to be adding, that this was an exception, it was an understandable one, but it was not appropriate to keep adding let's call them hardscape, whatever they may be. I don't think that was their word, but to keep adding elements to Central Park that are not part of its natural landscape and place of repose. So while this sounds, sure, why not? As Mark said earlier, or somebody just said earlier, the devil's always in the details. And this could be anything between a plaque or a sign or something on the 102nd Street. It's not a transverse, but the 102nd Street Road where the incident took place. Many people might consider that as a historical marker to be appropriate. It could be anything from that to many other things to, you know, to something as big and aggressive and as the suffragette, as the monumental women, or anything in between, or a whole lot of other things. So I just think we need to be really careful about inviting anything other than something that's green and landscapey into Central Park. Mark, I don't know that I oppose your voting yes, but I do think it's a slippery slope.
So thank you, Clary. Let me give a little more context, if I may. The concept of an exonerated 5 acknowledgement in the park is not new. Roberta, I see your hand, if I may finish first. It's not new. What's new is the borough president putting it on the agenda for this week. CB10, I actually attended a meeting or a webinar or whatever you want to call it, where CB10 explained a little bit about what they had in mind. And it was attended by Yusuf Hawkins, Dr. Yusuf Hawkins, who is one of the exonerated 5, and spoke eloquently about some of his experiences there without a trace of bitterness. It was a remarkable evening. While Clary is absolutely correct that this could take any form, and they were quite open to hearing what forms might be appropriate. There was no proposal, as far as I understand it, there still is no specific proposal about what this should be about, or what it should look like. The only reference point that they gave was that there is a plaque or sign in Central Park that acknowledges the location, the site of what I understand is called Seneca Village, which is a Native American habitation that was within the boundaries of what became Central Park, and depending on whose history you read of it, was removed from that site in rather abrupt ways. That is the best point of reference I can give you. The only other thing I will say, and I'll say this very gently, other than to say that the slippery slope is something that we can revisit, and if somebody wants to put a Saturn V rocket in the middle of the Great Lawn and call it the Exonerated 5 Memorial, that we will have plenty of opportunity to weigh in on whether that's the appropriate way to acknowledge this. I hear loud and clear Clary's park-centric focus on this part, makes wonderful points. In this moment, with all that else that's going on and the way in which the media is having a field day with the Upper West Side, my voting against, even an abstention, which is a vote against, that's a soft no. My voting against a concept, not even a statue, might be something that fuels a fire that we don't need to fan right now. That was my other thought that I should have included in my remarks before. I'm sorry for going on about this. I'm going to turn to Roberta and then anybody else who wants to be heard.
First of all, the Seneca Village was African-American. And some Native Americans. And in order to vote, you needed, a Black person needed to own property. And so the people own property in Seneca Village and were able to vote. It's a very exciting, I think it's one of the most wonderful things Central Park Conservancy has done in a long time. I think having something for the Exonerated 5 is absolutely beautiful. I think it's very important. It's especially important to our it's a message that we care about people deeply, that we've made mistakes, that, stuff happens and we make mistakes and we apologize for our mistakes. And I'm sure that it's going to involve all of the community boards that surround the park in any decision making, plus the borough president. And I think having something wonderful, whether Doug had suggested planting 5 trees, but I think some signage, some explanation about, what went wrong, what should have gone right. I think it's an absolutely fantastic concept, and I would be very upset if you weren't there and you couldn't vote for it, but I know you will be there and I know you will vote for it.
Thank you, Roberta. And I commend you to the chat where Doug has put an interesting idea, and I'm going to call on Howard.
Finishing the wrap.
Howard, I think you need to, Howard, you need to unmute.
You're right. This is a resolution just to explore the possibility of this.
It's a little more than that, but it doesn't say what the, it says that we should go forward with something in Central Park for the exonerated 5. It doesn't say whether it's a statue or a sign or 5 trees or whatever it might be.
Well, the concern was that it would be some kind of hardscape monument. So that's not, no pun intended, put in stone. That's something that is yet to be considered.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of people whose approval besides ours, typically anything that gets added to the Central Park in the way of this kind of a thing requires a referral to all 5 community boards that border the park with a view toward it eventually being approved by the Landmark Preservation Commission, which then writes a letter that recommends whether or not to approve that, whatever it is, to the Public Design Commission, who has, I believe, the final say on whether or not the design is approved. And if you were following the suffragist statue after it left CB7's hands, you know that it was the subject of significant input and further review and revision after the community boards and the LPC weighed in.
So we should try to keep the discussion to not whether we should have some kind of monument or some kind of whatever. It's whether we should just get more information on it, whether we should pursue learning about this. And if that's the resolution, it's fine with me.
No, it's going to be a little more than that. It's going to be calling on folks to move ahead with an action. It's an aspirational resolution. It is not, please build this thing in this place.
Okay, well, I understand now.
Christian, I see your hand is up.
My knee-jerk reaction to this would have been like the actual what happened might not raise to the level of that it requires something in Central Park, but the context of it, whether it was 5 minority kids that got railroaded, and that probably indicates that the systematic problems that we have with racial bias in the system, and given the current climate of everything that's going around us in the country right now, I think this is something that's worth pursuing.
Thank you. I think the Central Park connection is that's where the crime occurred.
Right.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to move forward with this. I appreciate all of your comments and pledge that if there's any way that we can even double down to ensure that whatever next step is something that we have a complete visibility to as a board, I pledge to do that. That is the last thing that I have on my agenda. I open the floor for new business or comments. I don't see any hands raised. I'm scrolling through. So I'm gonna
motion to adjourn.
Auctioneer going once and going twice. I think we all want to give a big round of applause and thanks to Cindy for the incredible job that she's already done,
Cindy.
as well as the one that she's signed on to do in the future. So thank you, Cindy. And with that, I deem us to be adjourned and look forward to seeing you full board in October, if not before.
Motion.
Great to see everyone. Bye.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you all.
Everybody.
Good night.